YouTube, what's good? Senju, back at it again with another video. For today, we are talking about my new Spear Dagger PvP only build. Now, for clarification, just let me go ahead and get this out the way. In my previous iteration of this build, I gave you guys the universal build, and I was pretty sure that I had made that clear, but I think some people didn't actually catch on to that. So for some clarification here, we're just going to go ahead and tell you, this is the universal build. This build is meant for PvP and PvE. However, keep in mind that this is a guide. This is not a copy and paste where you just take this and run with it. This is meant for you to basically say, okay, I understand. This is basically just a universal build, something to use for progression to get me from point A to point B. However, it is not a master of anything. It is just a jack of all trades build. This is meant for participation in everything. This build, however, is my dedicated PvP build. This is the build that I am currently grinding for, that I will currently be taking into all endgame PvP. There are some changes and some decisions that I made personally that I will go over here. However, keep in mind that again, this is a guide. You are not meant to just copy paste this and run with it. There may be things that you know about that I don't know about. There may be things that you enjoy that I don't enjoy. So take the gear, change the weapons if you choose. Change the weapons, maybe change some of the gear if you choose. It is a guide. With that being said, here is what we are running for tier 2. As you can see, the main difference between my universal build is that we are down on dexterity and wisdom. However, for the tier 2 triple evasion build, we are actually up a ton on strength, which allows us to have a pretty decent heavy attack chance. It's nothing to write home about, but it is pretty good at the end of the day. Now, as you guys know, Tico did have a talk today, and we are supposed to be getting the rest of the gear on the 17th. I was initially going to cover that, but I saw so many people already covering it that I felt that you guys didn't want some redundant information, so I went ahead with my initial plan, and that is to release this build today so that you guys could have a head start on what to chase. And considering the fact that you're pretty much going to have nearly a month to prep this gear before you get the Burkant daggers or the Crimson Hell Skewer, we have a lot of time to be able to prep a lot of this gear so that we can actually get to the semi endgame level before we go ahead and start changing out the weapons and syncing and all of that. Now, with that being said, I went on ahead and starred some of the high points of this build. You have a very high attack speed at 45%. Keep in mind that you do receive diminishing returns on your attack speeds at some point, and I've tested and felt that this point was around 50%, so I went ahead and got a 45.8% because the game does have rounding. So we are at 46% actually for attack speed. For the bonus damage, you have 50 bonus damage, nothing to write home about. What I wanted to prioritize was defense for this build, because a lot of people are making glass cannon builds, and glass cannon builds typically stack a lot of damage. However, if you look at a lot of the builds, a lot of the average hit rates for ranged and magic evasion is sitting around 1800 to around 2.2 on the high end for your hit chance, with some builds pushing way past that, but the rate at which those builds are pushing past that are very rare. And for those builds that are pushing past 2.2k hit, they typically give up a lot of their survivability. So I wasn't too worried about building super high for my evasion at a base, because we have tons of passives to actually go ahead and keep us well above whatever the hit they could possibly hit is. We'll get to that in a second. The melee critical hit chance at 1500, I understand for a lot of people is probably low. A lot of people are used to looking at, 1800, 1900 base. You have to remember that on a daggers build, you are almost always going to have access to thunderclouds. And in most cases, the average endurance level that you will be running into on a average build is around 1800 endurance. On the high end, I've seen some builds hit around 23, 24, but that's on the pretty much the very high end. And again, you're going to have thunderclouds, which shreds their endurance by 800, so you're going to have no issue critting people at 1500 crit. Now, something that people are also going to be paying attention to is the melee hit chance. Briefly going over this, you must remember that on daggers and spear, you have access to the nimble steps conversion through the mastery, which gives you an additional 300 hit chance, and you always pre-factor in the fact that you are most likely at all times going to be using enforcer. If that is the case, then we are always going to be above 2000 hit chance when it comes to using this build here. which is very good because I could care less about stacking 2000 hit chance when I'm not looking to attack anybody who's pushing above 2000 evasion in the first place. But when it does come to that situation, I'm going to be able to hit it comfortably every time I need to because I have the nimble steps conversion and I have enforcer, which I'm running at all times. So this realistically is always going to be 2000 hit chance. This is always going to most likely work because you have thunderclouds, which shreds the endurance, and that's always part of your rotation. Shield block penetration chance is what I opted for this time around because there's a lot of people spamming SNS and we need to be able to do some kind of damage. This right here is going to be the star of the show, collision resistance. This is where I say that, again, this is a guide, but I opted to go for collision resistance because I'm looking to counter the builds that are looking to counter me. And in most cases, we have brain dead DPS that run out and the first thing they want to do is what? Collision. It's always going to be collision. What you need to understand is that when you are looking at combos and you are looking at the things that typically kill you, what is the main portion of that person's combo that is allowing them to even get to the point where they can combo you in the first place? When it comes to great swords, which is the majority of what you're going to see inside of PvP, the very first thing that you get hit with is a bind, primarily through their precision dash. So you would think I should probably build my bind resistance. No, you need to build your collision resistance because the bind isn't what's allowing them to kill you. The collision into prone is what's allowing them to kill you because a lot of their burst relies on you being on the ground defenseless, which falls under collision prone. So building your collision resistance is very, very good. Now, you don't want to push too high. I actually was going to a point where I could hit 1000 collision resistance, but I'm not a tank. I'm not a tank. I'm not going to be pushing 1000 collision resistance. The other thing is, I'm not always going to be getting bombarded by someone using a greatsword, but for those instances where I am using a where I am getting bombarded by somebody using a greatsword, I still want to have a decent collision resistance so it lessens the effect of them being able to just prone and then knock me into oblivion. So, with that being said, if you guys are making a build, I would implore that you go and you look at the skills that are being used against you, see if they have any CCs on them, or find out what the most important portion of their combo is and build against that. If we start stacking a ton of collision resistance, greatsword quickly becomes obsolete because the main issue or the main point of their combo is kind of unusable if they can't consistently prone you. The other very important thing that I actually made sure to get is skill damage resistance because I wanted to make sure that everybody had some kind of decent resistance when it came to getting hit by skills. Now, if we are looking at our stats, we are running a triple evasion build. As you can see, we have 2.6k ranged evasion, 2.5k melee magic evasion, and 2.4k melee evasion. Now, the reason why this is not as high as other builds is because you need to pay attention to this up here. As you can see, we are the Amazon global server version of the game, which we do not have trait resonance for. If you look at almost any build that is pushing 3k melee evasion, they are almost always going to have trait resonance, and it's almost always going to be all used on melee evasion. Here's the thing. Greatsword Spear and Greatsword Dagger are the only classes that can exceed 2000 melee hit consistently, and on the very high end, they're pushing 3 to 4k. If you are running into someone running 3 to 4k hit chance, they are almost always giving up in other areas, and they are going to be killable by somebody else very quickly. I am going to go for 3k melee evasion, and I'm going to be well over 3k in both my ranged and magic evasion, simply by dodge rolling and getting Shadow Walker for my ranged and magic. And once I get trait resonance, I'm just going to build it all out into melee evasion and leave it at that there. Now, what I've actually done by not going so high on melee evasion at base is make it very accessible to get all of your other stats high. Keep in mind, we are running a passive that gets us to 3000 defense, so we're going to be very tanky there. We have 22k HP, 6k max mana, abysmal mana regen, but we're not looking to really, spam through our mana regen. We have extremely high buff duration, which means our cooldown speed doesn't need to be so high because the buffs are going to outweigh the cooldown. Skill damage boost, fairly high. And as you can see, again, we have a very high collision resistance, which makes it very hard for greatswords to stun us, or it lessens our rate at getting tornadoed. Keep in mind, though, tornado does hit 3 times, which means it has a near 70% chance to knock you up. So This is basically protecting you against prone, not so much as greatsword. For the gear, as we take a look at our gear, we're running the Peerless Obsidian Razors. This is what I will be running no matter what. This is just better overall for PvP because the Fatal Stigma ignores shield block, and that counts for the AoE version. We have the Spear of Unhinged Horror. However, when we do finally get the Crimson Hellskewer Spear, I will be changing to Crimson Hellskewer, which will give you 79 Dex, 40 Strength, and then the rest you could just throw into Wisdom if you really choose to. But that's just your personal preference. You can put the points wherever you want to put them. The main thing here is to get up to 79 Dex with the Hellskewer and 70 Perception, so you always have your hit chance. Now, outside of that, you will lose some critical hit chance. So if you prefer to have the critical hit chance, which I personally do prefer, sometimes I will just go ahead and swap back to the Unhinged Horror Spear so I can get my critical hit chance as high as possible. Plus, the fear chance inside of AoE perspectives is actually really good when you're fighting in Zergs. Now, for the sets, we have two-pieced Dawn Mist, which is First Light. This is going to give you a ton of magic and ranged evasion, as well as some pretty good base stats just to have. We have the Forward General's Cloak, two-piece Forgotten Lotus, and one piece of the Oblivion's Wrath. This is just to get us some more melee and ranged evasion so we could really hit a good base threshold. Then we have the Death Knell Gorget, the Primal Golden Cuffs, the Solitaire of Purity, the Ring of Celestial Light, and the Elusive Nymph Coil. Now, what I will be doing in my theory craft section is making a full build with Nebula accessories, because Nebula accessories will be available through solo dungeons now. So it is possible that you will be able to get Nebula accessories. I'm pretty sure they're going to be on a abysmal low drop rate, but we will at the end of the day be able to receive them anyway. With that being said, I will now be making builds with Nebula accessories as well as some other best in slot items that I feel are better for this build, and I might be able to push some better thresholds by being able to do that. Now, this is your food buff down here, the Rare Dawn Crab Platter. You have the Quality Special Level Fish Rice Bowl, and if you look at the runes, these are going to be your rune synergies as well as your rune non-synergy here. I'm running purely for the melee hit chances you can see here, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can also go for full synergy. For the artifacts, we are running two-piece Ancestral Armor with the two-piece Wildlands Protector and the two-piece Abyssal Beast for the hit chance. This is basically everything that you're going to need. I made it so that the stats that you see here are the ones in order of priority. Now, again, we're going for collision resistance as much as we can get, some CC chance, just because who knows, you might want some additional CC chance, but you're going to have more than enough because you're running Spirit Dagger. The main thing here is to get your Ancestral Armor so you get that additional 1500 HP. The other main thing is to get that evasion, just so you get that evasion buff, and make sure that you always have the Wildlands Protector Lunar Stone, because this gives you an additional 300, up to an additional 300 pity system for your evasion, which counts towards all 3 defensive evasion caps. For the mastery, if we go into the PvP only section here, what I have actually opted to do this time is to max out the daggers and make sure that you guys see what my ideal daggers tree will look like. However, the spear doesn't really have anything past what I actually got here for the first 130. So if you have 130 points, this is what you will be stopping at. And then for 200 points, this is exactly what you're going to be looking at. And if for some reason you happen to be the guy who has all 500 points already, this is what you can look forward to grinding out to get. However, no one's going to have this for a very long time, so this is just more of a end game goal, not a progression goal. At the end of the day, I'm very excited to use this build once I get all the pieces. I have a lot of the jewelry already. I'm mainly just farming out the armor right now, and I already have my weapons. I'm excited, man. I have been theory crafting this build for the past couple of days, trying to make sure that I knew exactly where I wanted to take this build. And the main objective for this build was to have high crit, high hit chance, but higher survivability, so that when we are in GVG Zerg content, it was harder to take me down because I can't get proned, I can't get stun locked, and due to the collision resistance and having significantly higher evasion than normal, I'm able to, if you know, between the CC evasion and just the collision resistance, I'm effectively able to not be stunned, not be proned, won't be getting hit by binds and roots and slows. That's what you really want. So without further ado, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you guys leave a like, make sure you guys subscribe, and if you guys want to see the Nebula accessories version of this build, it will be here eventually. I'm just going to theory craft that from the bottom up and make sure that everything is in place. This here is the PvP build. This is going to be the one that I go for. This is going to be my end game build. But again, at the end of the day, it is a guide. Take it and run with it. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.